Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching the stars drift by through the main screen. The ship had been traveling through deep space for 3 months now, far from Earth and far from any known civilization. Jake liked it that way. Out here, there were no politicians telling him what to do and no corporations demanding profit reports. "Captain, we're picking up something strange," said Amy Collins from her station at the back of the bridge.
Amy
Was the ship's chief engineer, a small woman with quick hands and an even quicker mind. She could fix anything that broke on the ship, and she had a nose for trouble. Jake turned around. "What kind of strange?" "It's a signal, sir. Very weak, but it's definitely artificial. Someone's out there." Dr. Lisa Carter looked up from her science. Station Lisa was the ship's expert on alien life. Though she had never actually met any aliens before, none of them had. Earth had been alone in the universe for as long as anyone could remember. "Are you sure it's not just space noise?" asked Dot. Amy shook her head. "Oh, this is different. It's repeating every 30 seconds. That's not natural." Commander Pete Rodriguez walked over to look at Amy's screen. Pete was Jake's second in command, a man who had seen real combat back on Earth during the corporate wars. He knew how to read a tactical situation better than anyone Jake had ever met. "Could be a trap," he said quietly. Jake nodded. Right. Pete was right to be careful, but Jake had always been curious, maybe too curious for his own good. That's why Earth had sent him out here. In the first place, "Put it on the main screen," he ordered. The bridge filled with static and crackling sounds. Then, through the noise, they heard something that made them all freeze. It was a voice, speaking in a language none of them recognized. But the tone was clear. It was desperate. It was afraid. "That's a distress call," Lisa said softly. "Someone's in trouble." Jake felt his heart start to beat faster. This was it. This was what they had come out here to find. Proof that Earth was not alone. "Amy, can you track the source?" "Already on it, Captain. It's coming from a system about 2 light years from here. We can be there in 6 hours if we push the engines." "Sir," Pete said, "we should think about this. We don't know who sent that signal. We don't know what we're flying into." Jake understood Pete's concern. The New Horizon was just an exploration ship. It had some weapons, but nothing that could handle a real fight. If they were walking into a war zone, they might not make it out alive. But Jake also understood something else. If someone was out there asking for help and humanity did nothing, what did that say about them? What did that say about him? "We're going," Jake decided. "Amy, set course for that system. Pete, get our weapons ready just in case." "Lisa, start working on that language. Maybe you can figure out what they're saying." The next 6 hours passed slowly. Lisa worked on the alien language with the ship's computer, trying to find patterns in the sounds. Amy kept the engines running at full power, pushing the New Horizon faster than it had ever gone before. Pete ran weapons drills with the small crew, making sure everyone knew what to do if things went wrong. Jake spent most of the time staring out at the stars, thinking about what they might find. I'd always dreamed of meeting aliens, but he had imagined it would be peaceful. Scientists sharing knowledge, maybe some trade. The desperate voice in that signal suggested something very different. When they finally arrived at the system, Jake knew his dreams had been naive. The space around them was filled with wreckage. Huge pieces of metal and strange materials drifted in the darkness. Some of the debris was still glowing hot from recent explosions. In the distance, Jake could see flashes of light as weapons fired at targets too far away to see clearly. "My God," Lisa whispered. "It's a battlefield." "Multiple ships detected," Amy reported, her voice tight with tension. "I'm reading at least 50 contacts, maybe more. They're arranged in 2 groups, fighting each other. Any sign they've noticed?" "Us?" Pete asked. "Not yet. We're pretty small compared to those ships out there." Jake studied the tactical display. Alien ships were massive, some of them the size of small cities. The weapons they were using made Earth's most advanced military. Technology looked like toys. Whatever was happening here, it was serious. "Captain," Lisa said suddenly, "I think I've got something. The language has mathematical patterns. I can't translate it perfectly, but I think I know what some of it means." Before Jake could ask what she meant, the communication system crackled to life. This time, the voice was clearer, and it was speaking directly to them.
Known vessel. This is Admiral Zixandra of the Veltar Collective. Your ship is not in our databases. Identify yourself before you are destroyed by enemy
forces. Jake looked at his crew. Pete had his hand on the weapons controls. Amy was ready to run, if necessary. Lisa was staring at the screen with wide eyes. This was the moment that would change everything. Not just for the crew of the New Horizon, but for all of humanity. Jake took a deep breath and opened the communication channel. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel, New Horizon. We received your distress signal. We're here to help." There was a long pause, and the alien voice came back, and Jake could hear the surprise in it. "Human, we have no record of your species. You should not be here. This war has been going on for over 300 years. Leave now, before you become part of it." But Jake Morrison had never been good at following orders when people needed help. And something told him that this war, whatever it was about, was going to need all the help it could get. 3 hours later, Jake Morrison sat in the New Horizons meeting room across from the strangest being he had ever seen. Admiral Zixandra looked like a giant lizard that had learned to walk on 2 legs. Her skin was dark green with silver markings, and her eyes were large and yellow. When she spoke, her voice came through a translation device that made her sound almost human. "Your species is completely unknown to us," Zixandra said, studying Jake with those alien eyes. "In 300 years of war, we have never encountered humans. Where do you come from?" "Earth," Jake replied simply. "It's about 50 light years. From here, we've been alone until now. I had no idea anyone else was out there." Zixandra made a sound that might have been laughter. "Alone. How wonderful that must have been. We have not known peace for so long that our young are born knowing. Only war." Dr. Lisa Carter leaned forward from her seat next to Jake. "Can you tell us what this war is about? Maybe we can help find a solution." "Help." Zixandra's head tilted in a way that seemed confused. "Little human, this war is beyond your understanding. The Kethmori Empire has technology that can crack planets in half. They have weapons that destroy not just the body, but the soul itself. Your small ship would not last 10 seconds against their weakest fighter." Commander Pete Rodriguez had been quiet until now, but Jake could see him thinking. Pete had that look he got when he was analyzing an enemy. "Admiral, can you show us some of your battle records? Maybe we can see something you've missed?" Zixandra made that laughing sound again. "Think you can solve in hours what we have? Failed to solve in centuries? Very well. Perhaps it will help you understand why you should leave." The holographic display in the center of the table lit up, showing a 3-dimensional battlefield. Jake watched as hundreds of alien ships moved in complex formations, firing weapons that lit up space like deadly fireworks. The Veltar ships were organic-looking, like they had been grown rather than built. The Kethmori ships were geometric and cold, made of what looked like living crystal. "The Kethmori fight with perfect coordination," Zixandra explained. "Every ship knows exactly what every other ship will do. Never make mistakes. They never show emotion. They simply execute their battle plans with mechanical precision." Pete studied the display carefully. "They're predictable," he said after. "A moment? Predictable?" Zixandra seemed offended. "They're efficient. They are deadly. They're predictable," Pete insisted. "Look at this formation here and this maneuver. They're following patterns. If you know the patterns, you can counter them." Jake saw something in Pete's eyes that he recognized. It was the same look Pete had gotten during the corporate wars when he figured out how to beat an enemy that everyone said was unbeatable. Meanwhile, Collins was studying the technical readouts of the alien ships. "Their technology is amazing," she admitted, "but it's also complicated. Look at all these systems that have to work together perfectly. What happens if you disrupt just one of them?" "The ships are designed with redundancy," Zixandra explained. "If one system fails, another takes over." "But what if you overload the backup systems?" Amy asked. "What if you hit them with something they're not designed to handle?" Dr. Lisa Carter was looking at something else entirely. "Admiral, these battle records show the same tactics being used over and over again. Both sides, for 300 years, you've been fighting the same war the same way. Has anyone ever tried something completely different?" "Different? How?" Zixandra asked. "I don't know yet," Lisa said. But on Earth, we have a saying. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. Jake felt a spark of excitement. His crew was starting to see possibilities that these aliens, after 3 centuries of war, had become blind to.
Admiral.
What if we could show you a different way to fight? Human Zixandra said, and now her voice had a different tone. You have been listening to our war for 3 hours, and you think you understand it better than we do. Not understand it better, Jake said carefully, but maybe see it differently. We're not Veltar or Keth Mori. We don't think like you do. Sometimes an outside perspective can help. Zixandra was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. The Keth Mori have just destroyed another of our colony worlds. 40 million of my people are dead. We will lose this war within a year, maybe less. What could you possibly offer that would make a difference? Pete leaned back in his chair. Admiral, on Earth we have wars too. Not as big as yours, but we've learned some things. The strongest army doesn't always win. Sometimes the most creative army wins. Creative, unpredictable, Amy added. Adaptive. Willing to try things that seem crazy, like sending a small exploration ship to help in a war between galactic empires, Lisa asked with a small smile. Zixandra looked at each of them in turn. You are either very brave or very foolish. Probably both, Jake admitted. But we're here. We want to help. Give us a chance to study your enemy. Let us work with your people. Maybe together we can find something that neither of us could find alone. And if you fail, then we fail. Together, Jake said. But if we don't try, you fail alone. Zixandra stood up, her tall form towering over the humans. Very well, I will give you access to our database. I will assign some of my officers to work with you. But understand this, Captain Morrison, this is not a game. The Keth Mori are not just trying to defeat us. They are trying to erase us from existence. If you stay, you risk the same fate. Jake stood up as well. Admiral, 3 hours ago, we didn't even know you existed. Now, we know you're fighting for your survival against an enemy that wants to destroy everything you are. We can't just fly away and pretend we never saw this. Why? Zixandra asked. We are not your people. This is not your war. Jake thought about that question. Why were they doing this? They could leave right now, go back to Earth, report what they had found, and let someone else decide what to do about it. That would be the safe choice. It's a smart choice. But it wouldn't be the right choice. Because Jake said finally, if we can help save 40 million lives and we choose not to, how do we live with ourselves after that? Zixandra stared at him for a long moment. Then she made that sound that might have been laughter again. But this time, it sounded different. This time, it sounded like hope. 2 weeks later, Jake Morrison stood in the war room of the Veltar command ship, watching the biggest battle of his life unfold on the main display. The plan they had spent days creating was finally being put to the test. Human ships are in position, reported Lieutenant Kelly Thompson over the radio. Kelly was a pilot who had arrived with the small fleet that Earth had sent after receiving Jake's emergency message. She was young and fearless, exactly the kind of person who could make their crazy plan work. Veltar forces ready, Admiral Zixandra announced from her command position. Jake took a deep breath. Execute Operation Swarm. On the display, the Keth Mori fleet moved forward in their usual perfect formation. Hundreds of crystal ships arranged in geometric patterns. Advancing like a deadly work of art, they had done this same attack thousands of times before. They expected the Veltar to meet them with their own formation, and then both sides would pound each other with heavy weapons until one side retreated. But that's not what happened. Instead of forming up for a traditional battle, the Veltar ships scattered in all directions. Keth Mori paused, confused by this unexpected behavior. Their perfect formation suddenly looked less perfect. When they had no formation to fight against, that's when the humans struck. 20 small human ships, each no bigger than a fighter, came screaming out of the asteroid field where they had been hiding. They moved fast and unpredictably, like angry wasps attacking a giant. The Keth Mori tried to target them, but the human ships were too small and too quick. Remember the plan? Jake called over the radio, hid the connection points that Amy identified. Don't try to destroy the ships, just disrupt their communication systems. The human ships swarmed over the Kethmori formation. Their weapons were weak compared to the alien technology, but they didn't need to be strong. They just needed to be precise. Each human ship targeted the communication arrays that connected the Kethmori ships to each other. Amy Collins had discovered something important during her study of Kethmori technology. The crystal ships were incredibly powerful, but they relied on constant communication with each other to coordinate their attacks. Cut off that communication, and the perfect formation became a collection of confused individual ships. "It's working," Kelly shouted over the radio. "The big ships are starting to drift out of formation." Commander Pete Rodriguez was coordinating the overall battle from the New Horizon. Veltar forces now hit them while they're disorganized. The Veltar ships that had scattered earlier suddenly regrouped and attacked, but instead of their usual head-on assault, they used tactics that Pete had taught them. They came from multiple directions at once, forcing the Kethmori to divide their attention. They hit and ran, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted effectively. "This is impossible," came a voice over the communication system. It was cold and mechanical. "Clearly, Kethmori. Our formations are perfect. Our strategies are flawless." Dr. Lisa Carter, who had been studying Kethmori psychology, spoke into her microphone. "Your formations are perfect for fighting other formations. Your strategies are flawless for fighting other strategies. But we're not fighting your war. We're fighting our war." The battle raged for 3 hours. The humans lost 2 ships, and the Veltar lost several more. But when it was over, something unprecedented had happened. The Kethmori had retreated. "In 300 years," Admiral Zixandra said, her voice filled with amazement, "they have never retreated from a battle they started." Jake felt a mixture of pride and exhaustion. They had won, but he knew this was just the beginning. The Kethmori would adapt. They would study what had happened and develop counters to human tactics. The next battle would be harder, but for now they had proven something important. The Kethmori were not invincible. "Captain Morrison," came a new voice over the communication system. This one was different from the other Kethmori voices they had heard. It seemed more individual, less mechanical. "I'm here," Jake replied. "I am Crystal Singer Velthak of the Kethmori Empire. Your tactics today were ... unusual, we wish to understand." "Why do you fight for the Veltar?" Jake thought about how to answer. "We fight for the right of people to exist. The Veltar, people. They have families, dreams, hopes. They deserve to live. People." The Kethmori voice seemed confused. "The Veltar are organic. They are chaotic. They are inefficient. They're alive," Lisa Carter said, joining the conversation. "Feel joy and sadness. They create art and music. They love their children. Doesn't that matter?" There was a long pause. We once felt those things too, for the war, before we became what we are now." Jake felt a chill. "What do you mean?" "The Kethmori were not always crystal beings. We were organic once, like the Veltar. But war changed us. We modified ourselves to become better soldiers. We removed emotions because they made us weak. We replaced our flesh with crystal because it was more durable. We became perfect warriors." "And what did you lose?" Lisa asked gently. Another pause. "Everything that made us who we were." Jake exchanged glances with his crew. This was bigger than they had thought. This wasn't just a war between 2 species. It was a tragedy that had been going on for so long that one side had forgotten what they were fighting for. "Velthak," Jake said, "it doesn't have to be this way. Wars can end. People can change. Even perfect warriors can choose to stop fighting." "You do not understand," Velthak replied. "The Empire will not allow such thoughts. They will punish me for speaking with you. They will send the Soul Render weapon to destroy your worlds." "Soul Render?" Amy asked. "A weapon that destroys not just the body, but the consciousness itself. No afterlife, no memories, no trace that you ever existed. Complete extinction." The bridge fell silent. Jake felt the weight of what they were facing. This wasn't just about winning battles. If they lost, humanity itself could be erased from existence. Then we'd better make sure we don't lose, Pete said quietly. The Empire is preparing a massive assault, Velthok continued. It will bring 1,000 ships to destroy the Veltar. Homeworld. After that, they will come for your Earth. You have made yourselves their enemy by winning today. Jake looked at his crew. They all knew what this meant. By helping the Veltar, they had painted a target on their own world. Earth was now in danger. How long do we have? Jake asked. 1 month? Maybe less. Jake nodded. 1 month to save 2 worlds and stop a war that had been going on for 3 centuries. It seemed impossible, but then again, everything they had done in the past 2 weeks had seemed impossible. The Kethmori throne world was supposed to be impossible to reach. For 300 years, no enemy ship had ever gotten close to it. The planet was surrounded by defensive stations, patrol fleets, and weapon platforms that could destroy anything that came near. But Jake Morrison was not planning to fight his way through those defenses. He was planning to sneak past them. Cloaking field is holding steady, Amy Collins reported from her position at the engineering station. She had spent the last 2 weeks rebuilding their ship's systems using a combination of human technology and Kethmori equipment that Crystal Singer Velthok had secretly provided. The result was something that had never existed before, a ship that was invisible to Kethmori's sensors. How many ships are we hiding? Jake asked. 50 human vessels, 200 Veltar ships, and 3 Kethmori defector ships, Commander. Pete Rodriguez answered. It's the biggest fleet we've ever assembled, and the enemy has no idea we're here. Jake looked at the main screen, which showed the Kethmori homeworld growing larger as they approached. The planet was beautiful in a cold way, covered in crystal cities that reflected light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. But Jake knew that somewhere on that world was the command center for the Soul Render weapon. Dr. Lisa Carter was at her station, working on the most important part of their mission. She had been studying the device that Dr. Ryan Park had created before his death in the last battle. Ryan had called it the Harmony Weapon, and it was designed to reverse the Soul Render's effects. Instead of destroying consciousness, it could restore it. Lisa, are you ready? Jake asked. As ready as I can be, she replied. The Harmony Weapon is untested on this scale. We're trying to reach every Kethmori on the planet at once. If it works, it should restore their original personalities. If it doesn't work, we're all dead, Pete finished. Lieutenant. Kelly Thompson's voice came over the radio from her fighter squadron. Captain, I'm seeing movement on the planet's surface. Looks like they're preparing to launch something big. Jake felt his stomach tighten. The Soul Render. Probably. Intel says they can fire it at the Veltar homeworld from here. If we don't stop them in the next few hours, this war is over. Jake opened the communication channel to the entire fleet. All ships. This is Captain Morrison. We all know what we're here to do. We're going to stop a weapon that can destroy entire civilizations. We're going to end a war that's been going on for 3 centuries. And we're going to do it by giving the Kethmori back something they lost a long time ago. He paused, looking around the bridge at his crew. These people had become more than just his officers. They were his friends, his family. And they were about to risk everything for people they had never met, on worlds they had never seen. Remember, Jake continued, we're not here to destroy the Kethmori. We're here to save them. And maybe, if we're lucky, we can save everyone else too. The fleet dropped out of cloak just as they reached the planet's atmosphere. Immediately, alarms began sounding throughout the Kethmori defense network. Jake watched as hundreds of enemy ships began moving to intercept them. Defensive positions. Pete shouted, protect the Harmony Weapon at all costs. The battle began instantly. Kethmori fighters swarmed around the human and Veltar ships like angry insects. The crystal ships were fast and deadly, but Jake's forces had learned new tactics. Over the past month, they moved in coordinated groups, covering each other and striking at weak points. Kelly, take your squadron and clear a path to the surface, Jake ordered. On it, Captain. Kelly's voice was steady despite the chaos around them. She led her fighters in a diving attack that broke through the enemy formation and headed for the planet below. Meanwhile, Amy was fighting her own battle in the engineering section. Captain, They're trying to jam our communications. I'm rerouting through backup systems. Lisa, how much longer? Jake called. 2 minutes. I need 2 more minutes to get the Harmony weapon ready. Those 2 minutes felt like hours. Jake watched as ships on both sides exploded in bright flashes. He saw Kelly's fighter take a hit and spin out of control before she managed to recover. He saw Veltar's ships sacrifice themselves to protect the new horizon. Then, just as the Kethmori seemed about to overwhelm them, something unexpected happened. "Captain," came a familiar voice over the radio. It was Crystal Singer Velthok. "Am transmitting coordinates to you? The Soul Render facility is heavily shielded, but there is a weak point. If you can get your weapon close enough, Velthak." "Where are you?" Jake asked. "I am in the facility. I have been working to sabotage the Soul Render from the inside, but they discovered me. I will not survive this, but I can give you the chance you need." Jake felt a cold anger building in his chest. Veltok had risked everything to help them, and now he was going to die for it. "Lisa, are you ready?" "Ready, Captain." "Kelly, I'm sending you coordinates. You need to get the Harmony weapon to that exact location." "Understood. Beginning attack run now." Jake watched on the screen as Kelly's fighter dove toward the planet's surface, dodging defensive fire and enemy interceptors. Behind her, the rest of the fleet fought desperately to keep the Kethmori forces busy. "She's not going to make it," Pete said quietly. "There are too many of them." But then something amazing happened. The 3 Kethmori defector ships that had been hiding in their fleet suddenly broke formation and moved to escort Kelly's fighter. They opened fire on their own people, creating a corridor of safety for the human pilot. "For Velthok," came a voice over the radio. "For what we used to be." Kelly's fighter reached the facility and released the Harmony weapon. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a wave of energy spread out from the device, washing over the planet like a gentle tide. The effect was immediate and dramatic. All across the Kethmori homeworld, the crystal beings stopped fighting. They stood still for a moment, as if remembering something they had forgotten. Then, slowly, they began to change. Their crystal bodies started to shift and flow, becoming more organic. Their mechanical voices became more emotional. Their perfect formations broke apart as individual ships began acting independently. "Is happening to us?" came a confused voice over the communication system. "You're remembering who you used to be," Lisa Carter said gently. "Before the war? Before you changed yourselves?" Jake opened a channel to the entire planet. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of Earth. The war is over. Soul Render is destroyed. You don't have to fight anymore." There was a long silence. Then, slowly, the Kethmori ships began to power down their weapons. We remember now," came another voice. "We remember what we were fighting for so long ago. We remember why we started this war. And we remember what we lost," said another. Jake felt tears in his eyes. They had done it. They had actually ended a 300-year war, but the cost had been enormous. Too many good people had died to make this moment possible. "Captain." Kelly's voice came over the radio, weak but alive. "Mission accomplished. The Soul Render is completely destroyed. And Captain... I think we just made history." Jake smiled through his tears. "Yeah, Kelly, I think we did." 6 months after the battle at the Kethmori homeworld, Jake Morrison stood in a place he had never imagined he would see. The Great Assembly Hall was enormous, built to hold representatives from 1,000 different worlds. Today it held the leaders of 3 species who were trying to figure out how to live together after centuries of war. "The rebuilding efforts on Veltar colony worlds are proceeding ahead of schedule," reported Colonel Sarah Brooks, who had arrived from Earth with supplies and construction equipment. "The Kethmori have been incredibly helpful, turns out. They're really good at building things when they're not trying to destroy them." Jake smiled at that. The Kethmori had surprised everyone with how quickly they had adapted to peace. Once they remembered who they used to be, they threw themselves into fixing the damage they had caused with the same intensity they had once used for war. Admiral Zixandra, who now served as the Veltar representative to the new Galactic Council, stood up to address the assembly. "The healing process has been difficult for both our species. 300 years of hatred does not disappear overnight, but we are making progress. She was right. There had been problems. Some Veltar colonies refused to accept Kethmori's help, too bitter about their losses to forgive. Some Kethmori struggled with their restored emotions, finding it hard to deal with guilt and regret. After so many years without feeling anything, but there had also been miracles. Dr. Lisa Carter had established the first interspecies university. On a neutral space station, Veltar and Kethmori students were learning together, sharing knowledge that had been kept secret during the war years. The medical advances alone had already saved thousands of lives. Captain Morrison came a familiar voice. Jake turned to see someone he barely recognized. The being approaching him looked like the Kethmori he remembered, but softer somehow. More alive? Velthok? Jake asked in amazement. Yes, my friend. The Harmony weapon did more than just restore our emotions. It also restored those of us who had been killed by the Soul Render. I exist again, though I am different than I was before. Jake felt a surge of joy. They had thought Velthok was lost forever when he sacrificed himself to help destroy the Soul Render. But apparently death itself could be healed, if you had the right tools and the will to use them. There is something I must tell you, Velthak continued. We have discovered the true origin of our war. Would you like to know what 300 years of death and destruction was really about? Jake nodded, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear this. Began with a misunderstanding, Velthok explained. A Veltok exploration ship found a Kethmori colony that had been hit by a plague. The Veltok tried to help, but their medicine was incompatible with Kethmori biology. Many colonists died. Kethmori thought it was an attack.
Ow.
The Veltar thought the Kethmori were ungrateful. Both sides demanded apologies that never came. That's it? Jake asked. A medical accident started this whole war. Pride did the rest, Velthek said sadly. Neither side would admit they might be wrong. Each attack led to a counterattack. Each loss demanded revenge. Before long, we forgot why we were fighting and only remembered that we were enemies. Jake shook his head. 300 years of war. Billions of dead. Entire civilizations destroyed. All because two species couldn't apologize to each other. But you ended it, Velthok continued. Not with bigger weapons or better tactics. You ended it by reminding us who we used to be. By showing us that some things are more important than winning. Commander Pete Rodriguez joined their conversation. The early warning system is operational, he reported. If anything like this ever happens again, we'll know about it before it turns into another centuries-long war. Pete was now in charge of the new Galactic Defense Force, a joint military organization that included humans, Veltar, and Kethmori. Their job wasn't to fight wars, but to prevent them. They had already successfully mediated 3 conflicts between other species who had heard about the Great War and wanted to avoid repeating it. Lieutenant Kelly Thompson walked over to the group, wearing the uniform of the Galactic Peace Corps. Captain, I just got word from the Outer Rim. We've made contact with another species. They're called the Zephyrians, and they're having some kind of civil war. The Council wants to send a mediation team. Any volunteers for the team? Jake asked. All of us, Kelly replied with a grin. Turns out preventing wars is a lot more fun than fighting them. Amy Collins appeared at Jake's shoulder, as she always seemed to do when something technical was being discussed. I've been working with the Kethmori engineers on something new, she said. They call it a peace engine. It's a device that can broadcast the same kind of energy as the Harmony weapon, but gentler. It helps people remember what they have in common instead of what divides them. Jake raised an eyebrow. That's safe. Completely voluntary, Amy assured him. It doesn't change anyone's mind, just helps them see other perspectives. We've tested it on volunteers from all 3 species. The results are amazing. Dr. Lisa Carter joined the growing group of friends. I've been asked to brief the new ambassadors who are going to the Zephyrian system, she said. Apparently, the story of how humanity ended the Great War has spread throughout the galaxy. Everyone wants to know our secret. What do you tell them? Jake asked. The truth, Lisa replied. That we didn't have any secret. Just asked questions that no one had thought to ask before. We listened to people who had forgotten how to listen to each other. and we refused to accept that war was the only answer. Jake looked around at his friends, his crew, his family. They had come so far from that day when they first heard a distress signal in deep space. They had started as explorers looking for new worlds to study. Now they were peacemakers, helping an entire galaxy learn how to solve problems without violence. "So what's next?" Jake asked. Admiral Zixandra answered from across the room. "Next, we build something that has never existed before. A galaxy where different species work together instead of fighting each other. A place where disagreements are solved with words instead of weapons. A civilization based on cooperation instead of conquest." "And if we fail?" Pete asked. "Then we try again," Velthok said simply. "Because the alternative is going back to the way things were before, and none of us want that." "Hey?" Jake nodded. The war was over, but the work was just beginning. Building peace was harder than fighting wars, but it was also more important. And for the first time in his life, Jake felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. The galaxy was a big place, full of different species, with different ideas about how things should work. There would be more conflicts, more misunderstandings, more chances for small problems to become big wars. But there would also be people working to prevent those wars. People who remembered that enemies could become friends, that differences could become strengths, and that sometimes the best way to win a fight was to help everyone involved remember why they didn't want to fight in the first place. The war was over. The peace was just beginning.